husband forced me to watch him doing it with another woman. Disclaimer is not my story time, send me on Instagram. I'm an overweight 28-year-old. My husband hates the fact that I'm fat. He and I dated for 2 years before he asked me to marry him. At this time, everything was pretty much okay. We had a lot of fun together, we were basically best friends. But after we got married, I ended up gaining some weight. Mostly because I wasn't really taking care of myself, and because I've never cared about gaining weight or not. But to my husband, this is horrible. After I gained 20 pounds, he started saying things like, "You're starting to look different and I don't like it. I can see your belly when we're having sex." And I gained another 20 pounds. And this is when he was really grossed out. If I asked him for a towel while I was showering, he would just throw it at me. Because apparently the sight of my naked body disgusted him. After a few weeks, I asked him to stop talking to me that way, and he said that he wouldn't because he didn't marry a fat woman. But I think he should love me no matter what. Even if I'm fat or skinny, he should still love me. He got to the point where he wouldn't even touch me or kiss me good morning or good night. And we used to have a pretty active sex life. Things got way worse. He started not coming home. Part 2 is up. My husband was so disgusted by my body that he couldn't stand the sight of me naked. This is when he stopped coming home some nights. The next day that he would finally arrive, he was always drunk and extra mean. I would ask him where he went, and he would say I was at the bar with my friends. And by friends, he meant his coworkers. And by coworkers, he meant his work wife. At this point, I had to take my makeup off, you guys, because it was way too cakey. Even my brother said it looked bad. I knew about my husband's work wife because at every work event, she was always there and she was always trying to be so nice to me. He would say things to me like, "Oh, he better be treating you right. You're so beautiful." But the whole time I know my husband's more attracted to her than me. This woman was really fit too. She loved the gym, and my husband and her had that in common. This is when I started becoming more and more jealous. Every time he stayed out with his friends, I would ask him where he went. Finally, he confessed one night that he had been hooking up with his coworker and that it served me right. He told me my body was so grotesque that he gagged every time he saw me naked. Yeah, my own husband is telling me that. But instead of reacting like a normal person and leaving him, I decided to get even fatter. I ended up gaining another 15 pounds. And this pissed him off even more. It made me happy to piss him off. Part 3 is up. My husband forced me to watch him do it with another woman. Disclaimer is not my story time, send me on Instagram. This is when I gained another 10 pounds just to piss him off. In retaliation, he started kicking me out of our bedroom at night. If I would get into bed, he would literally kick me off the bed. That's when he told me that I needed to go downstairs and work out, or at the very least, stop eating. At this point, I knew that he had been having an affair with his work wife. So I decided to ask him directly. He had no shame in telling me that he was having an affair with her. That's when he started saying things like, "Her body is way better than yours." He even said that he was more than happy to bring her over so that I could meet her. And that's what he did the very next day. He brought her to our house. I expected her to be on my side and tell him absolutely no. Instead, she started calling me names as soon as she came into our house. She started referring to me as the fatty. Suddenly, they started getting naked. And I just watched. Part of me couldn't believe it. I was frozen in time. While they were getting it on the couch, I was sitting there crying. The whole time my husband is calling me a pig. When they were done, they left. 2 days later, he asked me for a divorce. But I don't want to give it to him. He'll have to die married to me. What should I do?
Get ready with me to go to Candlelight Spring, a tribute to Coldplay. My skin barrier is ruined, so I have Aquaphor on, so I don't really know how much makeup we're going to be able to get away with today. I swear, I'm literally always doing something to my skin. Like, why can't I just take a break? Oh, well, it is what it is. I'm low-key running late, but I love the band Coldplay, and they're going to be playing some of my favorite songs. I'm telling you guys right now, this highlighter is literally the best highlighter on earth, especially for nose contour. Okay, I'm running late, but this is the fit. I'm wearing my Skims dress, and this is the makeup. I love you. Bye. Get ready with me to go out with my friends. Okay, it's 8:27 and I need to hurry up because we're supposed to go out at 9 or we're supposed to be there at 9 and I think the place is like 30 minutes away, so we gotta go. I just realized if I'm about to be late, why am I doing a get ready with me? I don't know, I do questionable things all the time, just go with it. And I know it may not look like it because I have the beauty filter on, but my skin is acting up right now, so I'm happy that we're going out at night and hopefully there are not a lot of lights in there. I did go to my dermatologist a few days ago because I have a bunch of closed comedones on my forehead, so there's so much texture. And I was on retinol for like a year and a half last year before I destroyed my skin barrier and had to get off of it for like literally 2 months. But she was like, "Oh, you have rosacea, so we're not going to put you on any retinoids." Which I get it, people with rosacea have super sensitive skin. But like, girly, I was on it for a year and a half and I know how my skin works. So I may or may not have went to a different dermatologist and got prescribed tretinoin. Okay, and since I'm just going out to the bar, this is the fit for tonight. I don't really like the shirt, but I don't have
This is how I found out my dad was following me on OnlyFans. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, it's not on Instagram. My mom and dad had me when they were really young. My mom was 17 and my dad was 19. For some reason, my mom doesn't like talking about him, so I never really found out exactly how they broke up. All I know is that they stayed together until I was 5 years old. Something really bad happened and then my mom kicked him out of the house. Like I said, I don't even know what happened. When I was 12 years old, he begged my mom to come back, and she let him live in the apartment we had. But he's pretty much a deadbeat. He didn't help my mom pay for the bills. He didn't even want to get a job. He even went as far as begging my mom to become a stripper. He said that she would make way more money than the job she had. She was a secretary at the time. When I was 15, he left our house again. I never got a bad feeling from him when he was living with us though. With a lot of hard work, my mom was able to put me through college. I graduated and I got a really good job. I bought my mom and me a house and we moved in together. Then COVID happened and I lost my job. A friend suggested I start OnlyFans and I decided to do it. I started making a lot more money than I ever thought I would. Some months I was making around $20,000. This one guy would send me $1,000 every single week. In exchange for pictures. Part 2 is up. This is how I found out my dad was following me on OnlyFans. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's on Instagram. So this one guy started sending me $1,000 every single week. In exchange, I would send him private photos. Everything was totally fine until he started asking me questions. He would ask me things like, what's your favorite movie? What's your favorite dessert? Because it's OnlyFans, I never really answered honestly. But then one day he told me, you love The Little Mermaid, don't you? And I was like, what? Because The Little Mermaid was my favorite movie as a kid. Watched it at least 3 times a week when I was a kid. First I thought it was a cousin playing a joke on me, so I decided to block them. The next day I get another message. This one says, I remember how you used to love hot dogs. That's when I really shit myself. Because my dad and I would make hot dogs every single Friday. It was our thing together. Like I said, he was a deadbeat, so he couldn't afford anything more than cheap hot dogs. And that's when he said, I have a confession. And before I could reply, he said, I'm your dad. I felt so disgusted. I blocked him and then blocked him from my cell phone too. That's when he sends me a long text message explaining why he signed up to my OnlyFans. He said that he was just trying to get to know me, that all he really wanted was to get me back as his daughter. Then why ask for nudes? Part 3 is up. This is how I found out my dad was following me on OnlyFans. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. As soon as I read his long text message about why he signed up, I once again blocked him. 20 minutes later, there's a knock on my door. Yep, it's my fucking father. Started knocking on the door so hard my neighbors came out. Called 911 and they came within a minute. I live in an area where there aren't too many people, so my house is really easy to find. Saw my dad walk to the backyard and try to get in through the back. That's when a cop stopped him and asked him what he was doing. Then he told the cop that I had invited him over. Then the cop comes to my door and asked me if I had invited him. I told him I didn't. Then I told the cop about OnlyFans. My dad was so ashamed he actually denied it. But of course I had all the receipts. I showed the cop my phone and the cop told him that he needed to leave me alone. He left my house and I didn't have the heart to tell my mom. But later that night, I see another person sign up to my OnlyFans. Turns out it was my dad again. This time he was offering me $3,000 for more pictures. And he confessed that he couldn't help but love me as a woman because I didn't grow up with him. Excuse me, sir? You raised me for half of my childhood. Wanted to get a restraining order, but the judge says it's not that easy. So now I'm considering closing my OnlyFans. I don't think it's fair though. What should I do?
Story time about my worst trip off LSD. So one of the kids in my friend group was about to leave for Arizona. And we would always talk about how we need to trip together before he leaves. And anytime that I would trip off acid, I would go to my one plug. Well, he ran out, so we had to go to somebody else. And I've never tried this kid's stuff before. I just said, fuck it, YOLO. Which should not have been my motto at the time. But it was. So that night, we're in the car, and one of our friends is driving because he's sober, obviously. And before I put the tab on my tongue, I started to get really nervous. And I have never felt like that before I've taken acid. But I kind of just said fuck it, and I put it on my tongue. So we go pick up 2 more people that I'm not really close with. So then we make our way over to our other friend's apartment. And I'm kind of feeling it, but not really. But then as soon as we walk into that apartment, I start tripping balls. And you know, everything was going good. But then my dumb ass decided to look in the fucking mirror. And as soon as I look in the mirror, I see myself smile back at me, like for part 2. Okay, part 2. So like I said, I look in the mirror and I see myself smiling back at me. And that's whenever everything went south so quick. I sat on the bed, tried to pull myself together because I didn't want to make a fucking scene in front of everybody. But then I got caught in this fucking loop. And if you don't know what the loop is, then I'm going to tell you what it is. It's basically where you feel like you're doing the same thing over and over and over again. And then I started looking around at everybody and it looked like their faces were melting. One of my friends got up off his chair, walked to the other side of the room, and I watched him do that. But when I looked back over at the fucking chair, he was still sitting there. So I looked at my one friend that was sober, who I was actually really close with, and I think he saw the look in my eye and he was like, do you want to leave now? And I just shook my head, yeah, like I could not deal with that shit anymore. So we go to his car and then we drive to my boyfriend's house. Because I could not go home, I would have got crucified. Well, we get in the house and as soon as his mom sees me, she knows that something's wrong, like for part 3.
Okay, part 3. So like I said, I walked in and she knew that something was wrong with me right away because she was like, oh, I have a letter from your boyfriend. And usually I would run up, grab it, read it really quickly because I would only get like 1 letter a week. But instead I ran downstairs because her face was fucking melting. So 5 minutes later, she has to come downstairs and help me get dressed into my pajamas because I forgot how to dress myself. I didn't want to be left alone that night, so my friend stayed in the basement with me. So he went and tried to go to sleep, but he couldn't because I was watching Butterfly Effect for 8 hours straight. Like, that was the only thing that could calm me down. But I still don't even know all the freaking words to it, which is weird. Like, he would try to change the video and somehow I end up back to Butterfly Effect. And then he tried to kiss me. So he left the next morning because he had to go to work, which was at like 11 a.m. And I took this tab at 8 p.m. the day before. So I was getting texts like, where are you? You're supposed to be home now. So I had to go home and act normal in front of everybody while I'm still tripping balls. And I also got grounded for coming home late because I could not come home at the right time because I was tripping so hard. And this lasted for about 24 hours.
Storytime about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my storytime. I'm sending me on Instagram. I come from a really big family. My mom has 5 sisters and 1 brother, and my dad has 4 brothers and sisters. All of them have their own kids, so I have a lot of cousins. And this means we have a lot of family get-togethers. Every single weekend, someone is hosting a party. We all get together and eat, and it's actually a really nice time. But there's always that one creepy uncle. In my case, it's my mom's brother. He's 46-year-old and has never married, but he's a bachelor. He's got money, so he basically has a bunch of sugar babies. Whenever my family tells him that he needs to get married, he says he'll never get married to anybody. He thinks women only exist for the pleasure of men. When I turned 16, I noticed that he would stare at me a lot. At first, it was just staring. Every now and again, he never did anything really creepy then, but just the staring was enough for me. I never told my mom about it then, not until I turned 18. This is when he started making comments like, wow, you're growing into your body, or wow, you got great hips. He would make comments about how I was growing up, like, ew. He even told my dad that he needed to keep me away from guys because I was growing up really quickly. And because of my curves, men would think that I was a woman. This is when I finally told my mom that he was making me super uncomfortable. She thought it was funny at first, so I avoided him at all costs. Part 2. Storytime about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my storytime. It's me on Instagram. When I told my mom that he was making me super uncomfortable, she laughed it off. She thought it was funny. She said, oh, you know how he is. So from that point on, I basically avoided my uncle every time we were at a family event. When I turned 20, this is when things got even worse. He would ask me things like if I was a virgin, or if I had a boyfriend, if I had ever been on dates. And one time he even told me that he would get very jealous if I ended up bringing a guy to one of our family events. One time he complimented me on the dress that I was wearing, so after that, I only wore baggy clothes to family events. The fact that I had to change the way that I dress so that he could control himself makes me sick. I finally told my mom again that my uncle was always bothering me. It's when she told me that the world is filled with men like him, and that all I needed to do was just ignore him. So I told my dad everything. My dad took it a little more seriously and told my uncle that he needed to stop making comments. My uncle just laughed. Part 3 is up. Storytime about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my storytime. It's me on Instagram. I finally told my dad and he told my uncle to stop making comments. My uncle just laughed and told my dad that he was overreacting, and that all he said to me was that I was a pretty girl. What a liar. In part 1 and 2, I told you guys that it was getting worse, but here's where it actually gets even worse. Like I said, I have a really big family, so my cousins are growing up too. One of them just turned 13 and my uncle cannot stop staring at her. She's maturing a lot quicker than most 13-year-olds. He's already staring at her. So here's what I did. At the next family event, I sat right next to him. Every time he would stare at one of my cousins or try to make a comment at me, I called him out for it in front of everybody. I even recorded the things that he said. The fact that I even have to do this at a family event makes me sick. Instead of enjoying my time with my family, I have to sit next to my creepy uncle policing him. Anyway, it's totally worth it though. I'm making sure that my cousins don't feel uncomfortable. After I had enough recordings of him saying nasty things, at the next family event, I showed it to my grandma. I basically played it for the entire family. My grandma told him that he couldn't come to any more events if he was going to behave that way. And of course, he apologized to everyone right away. But not to me, he apologized to my dad. After his half-ass apology, he was let back into family events. I don't think that's enough punishment. Give me some ideas because I think I deserve justice. Creepy uncle.
Part 2 about my psycho ex and my backstabbing best friend. So like I said, Sheila convinced me to break up with him, and I did. Fast forward, Sheila becomes super distant with me, and she's posting stuff on her Facebook like, oh, when your new boo gives you his hoodie. And her man had broke up, so I texted her asking who it was about, because I'm her best friend, duh. Finally, a few days later, after she was done avoiding me, she decides to answer with, we need to talk. I slept with Brad, and now him and I are in love with each other. And I'm like, what the hell happened to girl code? Like, yeah, I didn't want him, but at the same time, you're a snake. Like, ew. Anyway, so then she starts saying things like he's the best boyfriend, and the reason why I'm single is because I wasn't appreciative of him. I ended up messaging her ex and telling him what happened, and to get our get back, we slept together. Fast forward a month goes by, and then I get a text from Sheila and Brad on the same day saying that they broke up because both of them cheated on each other. And it was quite comical because Brad's like, yeah, you were the best girlfriend I ever had, and then Sheila's like, yeah, you were my best friend. I don't know why I would do that to you. I told both of them to F off, and then I told her ex what happened. So him and I laugh about it, and then 2 days later, I get a text from him saying that him and Sheila are getting married. Yeah. Storytime about my psycho boyfriend and backstabbing best friend. So a little background information, I was 17 and in 12th grade, and we're going to call my best friend Sheila. And she had just met this guy who was, quote, the love of her life on this vegan Facebook page. Well, the one day while they're on FaceTime, his best friend Brad saw what I looked like and he wanted my phone number. Fast forward, she gives it to him and I start talking and we hit it off instantly. I definitely thought that he was boyfriend material because even though we lived like 5 hours away from each other, we would Skype for like 9 hours a day, every day. Fast forward to my birthday, we make things official, and he wanted to see me for my birthday, so he decided to get a hotel room for us. So finally, him and I meet in person, and we end up doing the nasty. And it was terrible, but he was my boyfriend, so Well, after this, he ends up becoming weirdly obsessed with me. He starts saying things like the next time that he comes and sees me, we're gonna get married. After talking to Sheila about it, I decided to break things off with him because things were moving way too fast and it freaked me out. After I told him this, he started sobbing. He was like, I wish I would have got you pregnant so that way you couldn't leave me. And I'm in shock because, dude, it has been 3 months. You need to calm down. Like for part 2.